Okay, thanks, Christina. I'm so glad everyone's here. um, yeah, I was telling Christina, this is my first time doing a Zoom artist talk, so it might be a little awkward, but thank you for joining me. The idea is that I'll give an artist talk um, that'll be like about 20 minutes or so, I'm hoping. And then we can do a short Q&A afterwards. Yeah, if there's any issues or if you have any questions, you're also free to maybe leave them in the chat, and then afterwards I'll try and address them. So yeah, thank you. I'm just gonna start sharing my screen and hopefully everything will work. Oh, it doesn't look like I'm the host yet, Christina.
Let's see. All right, what about now?
Awesome, okay, yes. I can share my screen. Okay. Yeah, so I'm not sure if, oh, I'm just going to hide my self view. Yeah, so I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look yet, but the kind of culmination of my residency has been this website. And I posted a link on Instagram. It'll be up for potentially forever, so you'll always have a chance to look at it. I went with this obviously because we can't have an actual like show or gathering. So yeah, this kind of is like a stand-in for a presentation or a studio tour, or even just you coming over and asking me what I've been up to. Yeah, instead of actually going through the website though, I'm gonna do a little presentation that I put together. So we'll go back here. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about who I am. A few of you know me and my work. I'm also going to talk about where I was when I started the residency, and then what I've been doing throughout it. And I'll talk about the 5 projects that I'm presenting here as kind of finished projects as well. And then, yeah, we'll do a Q&A at the end, hopefully. So a little bit about me. My background's actually in illustration, but throughout my schooling, I actually had an interest in digital media. And so after I graduated, I took a job at a interactive company called Sego. And I worked there for 3 years on kids apps, doing the illustration and some of the play design, almost like UX, but not really. And kind of got my hands into digital media through that. But I recently left back in August, and I went to New York to the School for Poetic Computation, where I did a 10-week course there that was all about kind of physical computing, programming, but also like the critical components, looking at it from a social and culturally critical lens. And yeah, here are some of the things that we did. There was hardware where we actually worked with motors and different, oops. Sorry, I'm just gonna bring up the chat. Where am I? Oh, okay, I have to keep an eye on the waiting room. Okay, I'm gonna be multitasking then, uh-oh. Is there any way of just letting people in immediately? Do we know? Oh, admit all, okay. Okay, awesome. I think everyone should be in then, sorry. Okay. Yeah, so I was just talking about the School for Poetic Computation. And that was a really important moment for me. Those 10 weeks left me with a lot of new information, new skills that I was like just beginning to develop. And yeah, it was the first time I had actually worked with circuits or motors. And I had always really wanted to get my hands into that, but the learning curve was such that I was really intimidated, right? And so this was really like the first time I was able to just give it a go. And since then, there's been lots of things that I've come back to, and ideas and materials that I've developed that came from there. This was actually my final showcase piece that I made there. And I show it to you because it actually informed a lot of the work I did now, or in this residency. I'll just briefly describe it. It was kind of like a 3-part installation, but the main part was this acrylic glass filled with water with a mirrored bottom. And there's this mechanism that you can see just to the left of it that would slowly dip, almost like a fishing lure, into the water. And then I had a video projection that beamed down, bounced off the mirror and up onto the wall. And it was this idea of taking imagery and light footage off of water in a natural environment and then kind of recreating it through a synthetic man-made way here. Yeah. And so after I finished that program, I came back and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had left my job, right? And I've been introduced to all this wonderful new artwork and people, but I didn't really know where to take it next. And so really this residency was such a gift to me in terms of the time and the space that it gave me to kind of figure out what it was that I wanted to make when I didn't have anyone asking me to make specific things. Yeah, and it was also an opportunity to make things that I couldn't just make out of my bedroom, which is what I had been working out of, right? Yeah. And so initially, when I started this residency, I had wanted to continue these ideas that I started with the showcase piece, which was all about communication through technology. And I equated light as communication or a message, right? I knew that I was interested in developing or using video projection and mapping, installation, and then also motors and circuits. And so that's kind of where I started with this idea that I wanted to explore those things. And each of the 5 pieces I made does actually use those things in some ways. So yeah, I'll just get into what I did next. I'm also going to check the waiting room. Cool. So these are some early experiments that I started. At first I was really, I was kind of overwhelmed actually by the total freedom that I had. But I also had a lot of ideas that I wanted to try out, and some that I had come to the residency thinking that this would be a great idea, it's going to be amazing, and tested it out. So that was the pyramids that you can see on the left. I wanted to shine video projection through it and use these objects as like a lens and look at how that would manipulate the light and see what it could say about how the things that are communicated to us are changed by the medium in which they're sent to us, if that makes sense. But these actually didn't really turn out into anything interesting. And so I quickly moved on to doing these sketches, and I made a bunch of these to try and get like a bunch of ideas out. And when you're on the website, you can see these sketches, some that became actual projects and others that didn't. But they're at the bottom of the main page of the website in case you're interested. Here's some more. The one on the right was actually the installation sketch for the Windows piece as well. So the first one I'll talk about is the leaf dance piece that I did. It's the one that's most directly inspired by the previous piece I made at SFPC. It was also inspired by taking afternoon walks along the harborfront where FMC is located, or nearby rather. And yeah, the last time I actually made work for a solo show of my work was also during the springtime. And funnily enough, that work was really inspired by growth and flowers. And that's something that's actually come up again in the work that I've done during the residency. Yeah, the flowers and the plants, though, appear both here as well as in The Fool and Breathing, which are both pieces, here they are, that involve real flowers. And I chose to use them partially because it was springtime and they were blooming, and it was such an image of like hope and beauty, but also because they became an entry point into an empathetic relationship to nature, which is something that I was really interested in. And previously, I had also started investigating these support structures that you would find that people had made to actually hold up these big, large tree branches. And so these you can see on the left is a structure that I've made to hold up the drooping head of a tulip, right? And I think it's something that's like very sorrowful, and maybe almost like speaks about end of life care, right? And so the two pieces that I made with flowers are kind of building off of this, right? But instead of actually like an empathetic or caring relationship, what I ended up with The Fool, which is on the left here, I feel is actually more of like a cruel image. And I'm curious to see what you guys also think. Yeah, but the original idea for The Fool came about from thinking about how I could suspend a flower, and one of which was hanging it by its bud. But in doing so, I think it becomes a noose almost, right? And so I think it's an interesting image, but an added layer that I wanted to develop was an interactive component. And here on the website, it's seen in two videos, one where the flower is dropping into the vase and you can then choose to lift it up out of the water and it'll play another video. Or you could presumably leave it there, right? And so an idea for maybe a future installation would be one where you're actually able to walk up to the flower and press a button and allow it to raise or fall into the water, and thereby drinking or not drinking, right? Here we go. The next piece was this one called Rogue Pixels. And the mechanisms that I used for the other two, leaf dance as well as the flowers, were this slow motor mechanism, but I also wanted to try using multiple motors. And I knew about this Easy STEM project that they do with kids, where you attach a motor to like a cup or something and offset the motor to make this like little wandering creature. And so this was a way of kind of tricking myself into playing with motors and seeing what I could do. And at the same time, I also had these lenticular lenses that I was interested in using somehow. When you shine a flashlight through a lenticular lens, the light, whatever is behind it will be magnified, right? but depending upon the angle of the lens, it also kind of bends or warps the light in these interesting ways. And so I ended up making these robots and attached these lenticular lenses to them. And then I wanted to put them in front of a projection and see what happened, right? If I could interrupt this image that was being projected or video in some interesting way. Sorry, I keep stopping to let people in. I hope everyone's in and can see it. Okay. Okay, sorry. So while I was making these creatures, I started actually thinking about them as pixels, probably because I was thinking about screens, and when you use a video projection, you can't actually go up and see like the pixels, right? But I think in the back of my brain, I was also thinking about Hito Steryl's piece, How to Become Invisible. And it's a video piece. I linked to it in the project description, but it's this really kind of humorous, satirical take on an instructional video. And she talks about how to become invisible using different processes. There's more to it. But the part that stayed with me was actually this idea of pixels as these independent beings. And so you can see the image on the top left is her representation of a pixel. And then on the top right-hand corner, that's actually a resolution target. And so these resolution targets would be used to kind of grade how clear an image was. And they were used initially in analog photography, but then were used later for planes that would take photos from up in the air, and then satellites. And one interesting thing that that kind of shocked me, and that she talks about in the video, is that I think in 2000 or so, a pixel was 12 by 12 meters in satellite imaging. And then in 2013, it became 1 by 1 foot per pixel, right? And so really that doesn't have anything to do with my piece, but it made me think about pixels as these independent creatures, right? And that's what I've tried to convey in this piece. Similarly, the Windows piece uses video projection. And it started from earlier experiments projecting onto moving fabric, as well as an earlier piece I had made of this shroud, as I'm calling it, draped over this 3D form. And I made it years ago, but I never really came to a conclusion with that piece. But when I was experimenting at FMC Space with moving cloth and projection, it came back to me in memory. And so anyways, I started experimenting with this cloth and using two projections that created a kind of frame in frame effect. And so this frame within a frame reminded me of windows. And especially at the time, at this time during the pandemic, all of us are kind of looking outside of windows. It's a very like common experience. And so I wanted to kind of investigate that idea, right? So initially I had much more representational things like trees or rooftops that I projected onto it, but it just wasn't as interesting as the effects I was getting with just a simple video of the blue sky and the cloth overlapping the cloth. And so I ended up just sticking with more of an abstract feeling. And at the same time, because of this pandemic, I knew that I wasn't actually going to be able to create an installation and allow people to walk around it or into it, right? And so I had to then take these physical things that I was making and try and turn them into something digital in a meaningful way, right? So for this piece, I created a like a 3D simulation that I then rendered out. But initially, I would have liked for it to be this kind of installation you can see on the left. Yeah, but such is life. And I think it's also an interesting different avenue that I've kind of been forced down. Yeah. This piece is actually one that you can see, I think, until Sunday at FMC's window space. Here it is. This is the Hourglasses series. And again, I've written about these all on the website, so if you'd like to know more specifically about it, feel free to look at it. But I wanted to talk a bit more about where these things came from, right? So with these, I think I was actually influenced by seeing a show of Agnes Den's work. She is an American artist, a land artist or earth artist, I believe. But she had done these amazing drawings of pyramids. And so I think this hourglass form actually came from this interest in pyramids. And I had again like made this acrylic sliced 3D object that I had thought would be amazing. And that didn't really end up going anywhere, right? But I think because I was dealing with these reflective materials, it might have made me think of hourglasses. And once I thought about hourglasses, it immediately brought up this idea of time, which is such a rich theme and also felt very topical for this period in which we're in. And so I started drawing these illustrations, which were just like an exercise and a play on words almost. But after drawing these forms, I naturally started thinking about how the sand would actually move in these hourglasses. And so I made these 3D forms and created this particle simulation that sometimes obeys gravity, other times it doesn't, right? And I rendered these out and then mapped them onto the illustrations themselves. Oh, amazing. We just have unlimited minutes now. Anyways, so I mapped these back onto the illustrations, and that's actually what you can see in the window at FMC is the illustrations, which were then printed on transparencies that have the particles projected onto them. So that was really a whirlwind because I was worried about running out of time, but I hope that there was something interesting there. I talked mostly about where these ideas came from because I was hoping that people would be able to check out the website and see a bit more, read the write-ups that I did or check out more of the detail shots. But yeah, that's actually it. Thank you. Okay.